Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my channel, because today is a Tuesday. I'm going to be doing a tag for Tag Tuesday on BookTube. This is called the Childhood Book Tag. It was created by Fantastic Magical. Unfortunately, I went to check out her channel to see what she's up to lately, but unfortunately she hasn't posted any booktube content for 10 years, and her last video period is from 8 years ago. So unfortunately sometimes people just leave the community, have other priorities, and I haven't done a video in about 3 weeks, lots of writing commitments, but like to get back into making videos, take some time out. And so anyway, the number one question is, were you a big reader as a child? Is the Pope Catholic? Is water wet? Is the sky blue? I've been pretty much reading almost since I can, remember. Both of my parents have always been big readers themselves. Unfortunately, my little brother, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe he has a trauma for some reason. He just does not like reading. He hated books even as a child, but I always wolfed them down. I was booming through books really, quickly. A lot of my friends and classmates at school were shocked. Oh, wow, you read Ocean Mary by Lois Lenski. Oh no, that book is over 300 pages. And my best friend was shocked I read Behind the Attic Wall, which is about 315 pages in 2 days. Why wouldn't I read a good book that quickly? And particularly because, for younger people, it tends to be larger print, so you can read it a little bit more quickly. But so anyway, I just almost can't remember a time before I was reading. I loved going to the library and well, we didn't really go to the bookstore so much because growing up poor and working class. Later we got to lower middle class, so we didn't really have the luxury of going to the bookstore to get most of our books. But the pre-existing books from my parents' library at home, I just loved looking at them, even if I was too young to read them. And particularly because for many years my father's old books, and I guess some of my mother's too, but I believe it was mostly my father's old books, were stored in a bookshelf and some boxes in my big closet when we lived in Albany, New York. So I was basically just it was like a big buffet for me. I read whatever I could. The luxury of the choice, the richness of the choice. One of my favorite phrases, there was just always a book in my hand. I'm sorry if I'm rambling and talking too fast. This video is completely unscripted. I'm trying to work very hard at a more calm and slower pace of voice, demeanor. I'm not trying to sound talking way too fast and like a stooge on purpose. And so anyway, number two, did your parents read to you? If so, what? Well, what parent? Well, I mean, you can never. What these days? I know parents are a lot different from what I've heard, but traditionally, back in the day, it was, of course, parents would read to children, particularly at bedtime. We were reading the Chronicles of Narnia series. I remember that, and a couple of, off the top of my head, I can't really remember any other books, but I know we definitely read a number of I guess classic middle grade type of books together at bedtime. And particularly my father, I think, was kind of annoyed at me. We were reading ahead. Why wouldn't I read ahead? It's several chapters. It's a good book. Why would I want to only read one chapter a day when I could wolf down as, much as I could? And I'm sorry if I don't have specific book answers for some of these questions, despite my, elephantine memory, and even asking my parents and Googling the difference between these types of age categories, because I graduated to older books when I was so relatively young. I just don't really have a memory so much of reading books intended for a young audience, because my hyperlexia. And speaking of number three, my first bookish memory now, because I did have hyperlexia. I'm currently going through a deep dive of ancient Greek roots, and this was one of them, the root lexis, which means word, phrase, and speech, and hyperlexia means above word or speech. It's essentially full-blown advanced reading at a very young age. When I was 3 years old, it just came to me. This is a genuine condition. It's not woo-woo pseudoscience, what this is, a really observed phenomenon, particularly in children who are what they would now call neurodiverse. I don't really like that term for reasons that are too complicated to get into here. But anyway, I just had hyperlexia when I was 3 years old, and the first book lying around was the adult uncensored Grimm's Fairy Tales. It was a huge blast from the past when I saw that same edition, the light blue cover, a kind of reddish brown typeface font, and the I don't know, like the design or whatever, like I guess roses or flowers, something around the title on the front cover by my uncle's house in the guest room I was staying at when my favorite aunt and I visited him this past July in Denver. It was just wow. Like I mean, I didn't read the whole book through. Like I was only 3 years old after all, but it was there and I read it. And when my parents like came into the room by surprise, I pretended I was looking at the pictures in the book. I didn't want to get busted. And my mother eventually started suspecting, oh, I think she can read, but she's not telling us. You know, children love having secrets. I mean, of course, it's some secrets you shouldn't be keeping from your parents at all, but like knowing how to read and not wanting them to know yet, that's a kind of positive secret you have a right to like keep. Like children do have like some privacy. And so anyway, I was like acting wild in the car one day. I don't remember this story, but my mother has told it several times. And she's like, quick, read that, pointing to a billboard. And I read it and I got real quiet knowing I was busted. And when I came home, she, you know, tested me out with a lot of books on the shelf and like magazine and newspaper stories and such to see like, oh, maybe I just memorized stuff from being read to it so many times. Am a very good memorizer and I read everything, like even all of the things I was tested with, including adult novels I would have had no reason to read. And she like knew then like I really was reading. So yeah, I had the full blown advanced reading and oh yeah, Grimm's fairy tales. I really do believe that was a profound subconscious influence in my like being drawn to like, you know, macabre, dark, depressing eras of history for my historical fiction and things I just frequently like, you know, read about and watch like documentaries about and the things I like to read about as well as to write about. And like, so I really knew from an early age, you know, Grimm's fairy tales, like who doesn't know they're really dark and disturbing, many of them not like child friendly at all. So I basically knew from an early age, real life is not like flowers and kittens and glitter and rainbows and puppies. It can be like knock you down and like not give a crap about like pain and struggling. Like it can be like life can be really like shocking and cruel and not fair at all. So like I was prepped from reading Grimm's fairy tales at 3 years old. Number 4. Be honest. Did you read books assigned to you in school? Like, of course I did. Like, pretty much the only books I didn't like were in like 2 in high school that I'm thinking of. Maggie, A Girl of the Streets by Stephen Crane, who also most famously wrote The Red Badge of Courage. I didn't like dislike it. I just really wasn't that into it. I could have thought of better books to read. This was in 10th grade, which I had at the 11th grade honors level. And oh, Lord of the Flies, that I could do a whole video about that in the 9th grade in May 1995. I still remember this day with like anger. Like she completely violated the establishment clause with her homework questions about the religious symbolism in the book. And because like so many people had no idea what the F she was even like asking about with these questions, because we were not raised like in I guess like a super duper like religious home, or it just wasn't something we knew about. She proceeded to give us a whole-blown religious lecture violating the establishment clause. I am so angry, like, and everyone else in pretty much all of her classes, that they were angry at her too. So like Lord of the Flies, that's a bitter taste in my mouth. I cannot see myself rereading that book anytime soon, even 30 years later. But besides that, I just wolfed down all of the assigned books in class. Like I never understood like why were my peers like making fun of Brave New World and all these other books. I actually liked like 99% of everything we were assigned to read, and sometimes I had even already read the assigned reading. For example, A Wrinkle in Time in my 4th grade English group. We had like separate groups by our reading level, and of course I was in the advanced group. And like, for example, the teacher was asking me like, what is it or thing or whatever, this is like some kind of villain in the book. It's been like 30 plus years since I've read that book, probably like close to like 35 or something at this point. And I said, oh, I can't answer that question because I already know what thing is. And the teacher like, told me not to, you know, spoil it for the rest of the class. Like I'm good about that. I hate spoilers, so I don't like to spoil things for other people, and I will give a warning. But anyway, I always loved reading the assigned books and the stories. I even to this day, I do now understand in hindsight as an adult, many English teachers, unfortunately, they don't teach books the right way, or maybe they don't like always have the best books like children or teenagers preteens can relate to. And so that's why they like resent, oh, being made to read books. And this is a symbolism. And this is what you're supposed to think about it and how you're supposed to interpret it instead of like reaching the children where they are now, like the way they can be related to what's relevant to them instead of saying, this is what a pretentious literary critic in the 19th century said about this book, and you shall never ever disagree with that. Now, here's some books that are like completely above your head. Like maybe you'll understand all the vocabulary, but you haven't gone through like enough of life to understand what these like characters in their 30s are talking and feeling and thinking about and such. So I do think many teachers could do better at teaching like literature to young people, but other than that, I just absolutely loved the assigned readings, and that continued for the most part anyway, even when I was at university. Number 5, where did you get your books as a child? Now, as I said earlier, I went to the library. Like we went like pretty much every week, and sometimes we would go to the bookstore, and in addition, the books that were already on our shelves at home for my parents. There weren't like so many books at my either of my grandparents' houses because they're like working class people. They don't really have like so much time out of the hard busy day for like reading for pleasure. I mean, there were some books there mostly left over from my father, but again, there was no like big bookshelf at all at either of my grandparents' house to choose from. Maybe a little bit more reading at my maternal grandparents' house, but I know my paternal grandpap, whose 30th yahrzeit death anniversary was just this August. He loved reading Western novels. That's not a genre I have ever been into. I don't like Western films either, like off topic for this video, but just unfortunately there just wasn't a lot of reading material when I visited my relatives, but most of it, pretty much all of it, came from the library visits every week and from what my parents already had at home. I'm sorry if I'm repeating so many things, but this is just my like reading journey, I guess. Lots of overlap between questions. Number 6, did you watch any television meant to inspire reading? Now, being the age I am, I look a lot younger than I really am. I was born in 1979, believe it or not. So of my generation, like very late tail end of Gen X. I'm in the category also known as Xennials, or some people pronounce it Zennials. So they're like the youngest Gen X plus the very oldest millennials, like late 70s through like very early 80s. Like I watched Reading Rainbow. That's an awesome show. It got me like aware of so many awesome books. I'm sorry for saying awesome too much. Like maybe some books I had already read, and they personally engaged children with the stories. Oh wow, reading is awesome. You can go on adventures. If you like this book, here are some books just like it. Or if you're interested in history, these are some more awesome historical books. Or they would do themes around the holidays. I just recently found this awesome YouTuber. He's a British guy from, as he would call it because he's British, Gen Z instead of Gen Z, J Flex. He does a lot of like reaction videos to stuff from older generations, and he's so like honest, like he's respectful, like wow, like this music from the 70s and the 80s and 90s, this is so groovy. I would love to check out more of this instead of like being all snarky, like, and making fun of stuff the elders did. They're not cool. I'm a cool Gen Zer. He's not like the typical reaction from a young YouTuber I would expect at all. But anyway, he had one of his videos was sounds all like 90s kids will instantly like recognize, or like might have been like 80s kids as well, just in that general time frame. And one of them was the introductory theme song from Reading Rainbow. That really took me back, even though I haven't watched that show in decades. So that's a really great formative show for helping to teach so many young people of my generation and a little bit afterwards to read. Number 7, what sorts of genres or storylines did you like? Again, is the Pope Catholic? Is water wet? Like I'm always been all about historical fiction, both reading and writing, and I've just drawn to pretty much everything of the past. I mean, there's a video like compilation, I guess, anthology from a bunch of like vintage fashion people that's I guess gone viral or something. It's from like 5-10 or so years ago, and they say like we have vintage taste in like fashion, music, movies, whatever like that, but we don't have vintage values, and they're glad they were born and they live in the present because like we have modern medicine, like people in minority groups aren't like mistreated like they unfortunately were in the old days. So that's how I, feel about history. I love like reading historical fiction, all these rich world building details, like the cars, the clothing, particularly as like a preteen, I was kind of like obsessed with the 19th century and a little bit of the 18th century, and it totally flipped on its head. Like once I was like, 13, 14, it was pretty much only 20th century historical fiction. I'd only started changing to not reopening, like I guess revisiting some of what I had thought were like long, like permanently shelved characters from the 19th and 18th century, but my main focus at present is still the 20th century. But I do still well, I mean, that's a long topic for another video, but like I don't only write about the 20th century anymore, but like it's still my primary thing, and that's like historical fiction. I just loved like pioneer stories and like 19th century stuff when I was a preteen. That was like my favorite historical era. I even had this like little stupid fantasy. Oh, we're like taking a long walk at like a park, like Five Rivers, or you call it Thatcher Park in upstate New York, place like that. Like, oh, and we're walking so long, we're gonna walk through a time warp and come out in the 19th century. That would be so groovy. Or oh, the caves at Thatcher Park. Maybe I'll stumble across a time warp and there and emerge in prehistory. I love prehistory as well. So basically, all about historical. And I did discover in the 5th grade we read a book with short stories meant for, I mean, I don't think they're written for kids so much, but they were like younger characters with, I guess, like middle grade-ish type of plots that would like, be more accessible, plottable to preteens. And so I discovered science fiction from there. The first story there were 2 stories by him in the book actually, but the first in the book was from Isaac Asimov, who's definitely one of my top 10 favorite writers. So my secondary love is science fiction. I got super into reading like nonfiction about like imagined future life, for example. Oh, what kinds of houses would people live in? Life in other, planets. How would we grow our food? What type of language and technology would we have? I even got super into like planning my whole like not like a continuing story type of interconnected, but just characters living in various different future eras and types of houses, like a farm in outer space and a flying city and houses made entirely out of recycled materials. And some of those stories I planned are now already set in the past, like 1999 or 2023, but definitely all about the historical fiction and a little bit of the soft sci-fi as well. Number 8, favorite children's or picture book. And number 9, favorite chapter or big kids book. Now, I had a lot of trouble with this question. I had to ask my parents if they remembered, and I was like Googling what's the difference between like, chapter books and lower middle grade, because there's so much like overlap. And I was like kind of frustrated. I was seeing like they're listing chapter books as things that seemed like such middle grade, like the Little House books, the like Charlotte's Web, the Ramona Quimby series. Like who would consider that chapter books? They're too complex, because I had, again, hyperlexia. I graduated pretty much full time to older kid books when I was young. My 4th grade teacher, I owe so much to her for like breaking through with my like condition. That's a whole story for another thing. But anyway, she was on maternity leave, and our like substitute teacher long term was like telling me when I was in the classroom library, like, oh, I know how frustrating you must feel. You're so advanced. You've already pretty much read through all the books intended for kids your age. And she recommended the Witch of Blackbird Pond. So basically, but by the time I was in like 4th grade, I was already reading what we would now call like, upper middle grade. And I guess like in the 5th grade, I was, reading like, Tom Sawyer. That was also listed, I saw, as a chapter book. Like, what are you smoking when you seriously think this book with this kind of, language is a chapter book? About 10:30, the cracked bell of the small church began to ring, and presently the people began to gather for the morning sermon. The mayor and his wife, for they had a mayor there, among other unnecessaries. The justice of the peace, widow Douglas Fair Smart, and 40, like, they're just using like type of like vocabulary that you don't really associate with the chapter book, and the chapters are longer. And so would this really be considered like a chapter book by like modern standards? I don't really like putting, labels on books. No, I'm sorry, that's going to be for a future question. But anyway, like I just graduated so early from what we would now consider chapter books to adult books. I just don't really have so much memory. It was basically like lower middle grade, like was it Cam the Librarian, I think this book might be called. Her real name is like Jennifer, because it's the 80s. Every other girl my age is named Jennifer, and I don't think I've ever known a single bad Jennifer, which, like, because so many of them, that's like a really good record for a name in my, like, recollections, personal encounters. But anyway, like, and I know that that would probably be like a lower chapter book as well, and the couple of other like mystery type of, like, kids solving mystery type of books, and to my recollection they would be like lower middle grade type of books, like the Babysitter's Club. Those again are like middle grade general or lower middle grade. So basically I just don't really have so much of a memory. And like Francis the Hedgehog, I remember liking those, and like Max, is he a kangaroo or something like that? And the Arthur the Aardvark books, I do remember liking those books. Like, who is Max? Is he like a dog or some kind of character? I'll put this in the description below. I should have done more freaking research before starting to film. But anyway, like, I graduated so early. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record and a total like idiot. Number 10. Favorite children's series. Well, I did absolutely love the Little House books. I got this anthology of the first few books. It was by the Carrot Festival at Congregation Agudat Achim in Schenectady or Niskayuna, New York. Every fall they have a wonderful like community-wide thing, and that includes like vendors of like used books and stuff inside, and outside they have like buy food and like a reptile petting zoo and like handmade jewelry and wonderful stuff. And so anyway, this is one of the books I got by the Carrot Festival, or maybe it was another like just used sale they had there. Like the writing is so freaking large, and that's an unfortunate thing to open to. Indians Ride Away, like knowing what we do now about how the Native Americans were treated, and how I knew from the age of 5 or 6, even before reading these books. But so anyway, like these were also listed as like chapter books. Like, how this is like classic middle grade to my recollection, and this also played into my love of historical fiction. I like the Babysitter's Club, at least until I don't remember when exactly I stopped reading them, like what number the books were, but I like read them over and over and over again, and I just came to feel by the time I was 11, 12, these are annoying goodies, like, and that's why I created my own Atlantic City characters as like anti-goodies, and they were just, I made them as deliberately over the top as possible on purpose in the beginning, in the first few years, because, oh, I'm goading the censors, my imagined future censors. These kids are like, having sex at only 10 years old, which I realize that's, what the F is that? But it's just in my mind, I wanted to go as far away as possible from what I saw as unrealistically perfect, annoying goodies in the Babysitter's Club and similar books, who never face actual like real world stuff. It's just they're so well behaved. Problems are quickly solved. There's no drugs or peer pressure or like alcohol or wild unchaperoned parties or like way too young sex or anything like that. So I just, well, my mind, it was kind of jacked for me to be thinking like that. But, I was only 11, 12 years old, and I loved the Borrowers series. The Amelia Bedelia series, that was, I guess that would be more like a classic pictures slash chapter book. I really did love them. Like, she interprets everything literally. The Carolyn Haywood books, her B is for Betsy series, which is kind of a little bit dated when I revisited the first book many years later. Like, wow, I mean, well, that could be a whole video talking about that book and other books in the series. I remember like Betsy's star, her little sister Starlight, born around Christmas, with like, the Christmas star, and Betsy and Billy, Betsy and the Boys, and Mrs. Haywood also did like some other books. For example, Primrose Day, a young girl from England is sent to the U.S. to escape from the Blitz instead of just being sent to the countryside, and a couple of other books she did. And I did love the Ramona Quimby series by Beverly Cleary, the Babysitter's Club, until I got annoyed by how annoyingly goody they were and totally like out of touch with the real world. That's another reason I gave up the series I sarcastically call Full Toilet Sorry Not Sorry when I was 13. I was just so sick and tired, frickin' sick and tired of them always like Michelle always getting her way. Nothing really bad happens to them, and serious problems don't exist. It's like the 1950s, like too perfect image. And I loved Lois Lenski's books. Her books aren't really, a continuing characters series type of thing, but they're a thematic series, different regions of America in historical eras. For example, like Strawberry Girl, which is in Florida before like the beach and the building booms, and that was so. I was horrified when I reread it a couple of decades later. I love this book so much. I reread it. It's kind of boring, and the writing is like kind of stilted, like way too many adverbs. It's a Deus Ex Machina ending. This actually won an award, and that was a Blue Ridge. Billy, How Christmas Came to Blueberry Corners, or maybe that was the name of a chapter, or Blueberry Corners might have been the name of the book. Ocean Mary, which so many of my friends and classmates were shocked I read. Oh, I'm not reading Ocean Mary. Don't recommend that to me. It's over 300 pages. And there was Indian Captive about Mary Jemison, who was her family, and she like were attacked by Native Americans, and she came to like identify and take that as her. She was like basically an adopted Native American, did not want to go back to white people when she was found later. So Mrs. Lenski had so many, great, well, I don't know if, well, judging by my reaction to Strawberry Girl on revisiting it, maybe not great writing, but I did absolutely love them at the time when I was still like reading as a reader instead of reading as a writer so much. And hopefully this video has not been too long and just rambling and all over the place, but again, because I graduated so like early to the books meant for older people, I don't really have so many memories of like reading like so-called chapter books, which we didn't really even use that label at the time. And even like middle grade, I pretty much like graduated like quickly to what we would now call like lower YA, and we just didn't really have these age-based categories at the time, and because YA wasn't really a thing. When I discovered Hermann Hesse at 14, Damien was the first book of his I read. That was pretty much it. I didn't really read any books meant for teenagers. Like, but I was graduated full time to adult literature. I mean, yeah, I did read some books that were more like upper middle grade and YA, but pretty much like full-time adult literature, because like why would I devolve back into reading books meant for teenagers when I'm like growing up, and my reading level has always been like 4 levels above me, the stuff like that. If things had been different, they definitely should have allowed me to start kindergarten when I was 4 years old in 1984 instead of making me wait for 1985. That they would never get away with that now, just because of the like issues I had that were undiagnosed at the time. But so anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.